Hi, my name is Julian, and I'm demonstrating the harp today, or I could say I play the harp, but that's pretty obvious. The harp is one of the oldest instruments. We see it in on vases from Greece. We see it all the way through. We see it in stained glass windows with angels. I think one of the reasons is there's no way to play a bad note on a harp. Always very soothing. The harp itself only exists, though, in civilizations that have archery. And there are two reasons. Obviously, the design is very similar, as we will see in a moment, I hope. Yeah. Also, when you release a bow, when you're shooting a bow and arrow, it makes a thrumming noise like that. So, two good reasons, and also a fun fact to know and tell. Harps were very prevalent in the British Isles. In Scotland, they had huge harps that they would wheel to the top of hills to frighten the enemy. And they would just build them and let the wind blow through them, so there was a roaring noise. There were harps that, as I, will be talking about, that also were 9 strings. They were used to pick out tunes if you were a music tutor or if you were a choir master and traveling. That was very simple. There were also the little stubby harps that you see on the Guinness cans, and those are the symbol of Ireland. Those are actually that little and stubby because they are strung. In period, it would have been with either copper or tin strings. Now it's a steel or a metal wrapped string that they use on it. A very different technique, but they're built like that because they have to accommodate the tension of those strings. This is a pretty standard harp for the Middle Ages. Obviously, this one is strung with nylon. In period, it would be strung with gut. Interestingly enough, they also used horsehair on occasion to do that. I've always been interested to know what that actually sounded like. So getting back to the choir masters, music was not general sheet music. It was long before the printing press, and the way that people learned was by ear, as they say. And that meant that a tune was played and you sung it back. So, for example, a choir master, imagine this is a 9-string harp. A choir master might come in to teach, in this case, a 14th century Spanish carol called Rio Rio Chio. And he would be going, and then having people sing back. An interesting thing about the harp in general is if you ever look at the top of a piano, the strings in it are very similar to the strings on a harp. And in addition, you have on a piano, if you look at the keyboard, the black keys. These little gizmos are called levers, and they are actually the black keys. They take a string up half a step. So it sounds like this. When I've just put the lever down, it sounds like this. Put the lever up. If you want to be dramatic in a particular setting, you can always go. So they've got all kinds of uses. They also were a big game changer. They came in towards the end of the Middle Ages. They were a huge game changer because it meant that you didn't have to retune for every song or just play in one key or figure out how to play and get around the notes that weren't there in that particular key. One of the earliest of the performance pieces was done by a 12th century troubadour, and it was called Kalinda Maya. Again, it was Spanish, but it's a good example because this is in a totally different key. I'm putting this in the key of D now. And it was played probably with one hand. If you wanted to get fancy in the Middle Ages, you might add a drone. So it would be a drone was just one note, or if you were really fancy schmancy, two notes, and usually went between two chords or two notes. In this case, it's D and A. So very, very simple. I'll be honest, we do not know exactly how things sounded because obviously there were no recordings. On the other hand, as more traveling musicians arrived, more what they call ornamentation, rather than the drone, you had maybe chords instead. And these traveling musicians were very sought after in manor houses and castles as the Middle Ages progressed. These were folks who might stay 6 hours, 6 minutes if they weren't so good, or 6 months. There's a lovely, lovely song from the 15th century by a troubadour who just loves winter because then he can just sit inside at some nice house and eat food and play and flirt with the boss's wife. One of the things that these traveling musicians did do, and I'm going to put down my levers as I talk to you, one of these things that they did were write songs and dedicate them to their hosts. One of the most famous traveling musicians was Turlough O'Carolan, and I want to close this with just a snippet of what he wrote for a gentleman named Lord Inchiquin. So you see, very jolly. This is a very versatile instrument. If we were together instead of virtual, I would invite you to put your hands on the harp and enjoy it. It's a lovely instrument. And thank you.